welcome everybody to GAMEOLOgy. We're back. I am one of your hosts, Matt.
And I'm Attila, Gabriel Brzezinski.
And today we're going to be talking about...
microtransactions.
That's right. Now, off the bat, I think the strongest feeling I have towards microtransactions is the way they're used for evil. In the way that a lot of gambling psychology is used with microtransactions. And that they know that they can get more off somebody by charging 50 cents, $1 here, by using the psychology that they use with casinos. And Destiny does this as well. And Blizzard does this a lot with their packs. They know that delayed gratification is more important than giving somebody the same thing all the time. Because once somebody can predict what it is, they're not as likely to get it. They would rather you spend 50 cents. You might get something worth a lot. And also what we're seeing a lot of the same evil psychology is that free-to-play games that give you, here's the game, isn't this fun? And then they make you wait. And then they give you something, and then they make you wait. And it's, to me, it's just an evil manipulation of a mind. If I'm going to be addicted to a game, I want to feel good about that. I want to be like, wow, Final Fantasy VII was so addicting. I stayed up all night and played it. I don't want to be like, this game has taken $900 of my money, because you don't want your business model to be people that shouldn't be spending their money. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think that overwhelmingly there's this sort of negative sentiment towards microtransactions just in general. A lot of people get the feeling that, like, if they've spent money on the game, why should they have to spend more on it for like these little, loot drops or whatever. You look at a game like Animal Crossing, which features a lot of energy systems in the game. These idea of like you plant a tree and then 3 days later it grows fruit, and you have to wait 3 days every time before it grows fruit. And these energy systems exist in the game. They exist in things like the recently popular Stardew Valley. But somehow in these games, it doesn't register as like a time waster or a manipulative kind of thing. It's just, it's part of the game, and it just feels natural. Whereas once a company ties a dollar value to those same energy systems, they say, like, you can skip this if you pay real money, then it starts to sort of go down the road of being nefarious. I think the one thing that most people... I'm not going to say they're not going to have a problem with it, but the one thing that most people shouldn't have a problem with in terms of microtransactions are paying for content, because that's fair, right? You're getting something solid that you can go back to and use at any time. I think the more that microtransactions tend towards the consumable side of things, or even, God forbid, the random consumable side of things, that's when things start to get more nefarious.
Consumable is the key word there. Just that, as soon as I hear that, it's almost like a dirty word of like, you get it and then it's gone, and then we want you to come back for more. Whereas if it's, my smaller transactions have been around with, in a way, expansion packs for games and then DLC. And those make a lot of sense, because you have something that you have it and you have it forever. We're going to be talking a lot about Plants vs. Zombies. Yeah. And one of the biggest problems I loved Plants vs. Zombies 1, and I couldn't get into Plants vs. Zombies 2 as much as I wanted to, because of the sort of ticky-tacky way they had dribbling out the content. And it's like, if they just had an option to like buy it all so you can play it, I would have loved that. But they lost a fan out of me. And I'm wondering if, on some chart, they're like, all right, guys, we have a lot of Matts that aren't going to like this. A small percentage of them aren't going to give us money, but look at all these other people we're going to get. And this is a whole new subscriber base, and these are all the people that play Facebook games. And it just, to me, it feels like they don't care about me.
No, and it's very true. They're preying upon a very specific sort of mindset of people. Like, I guess people like us who maybe we don't necessarily play a lot of like Facebook style games. We're more heavily invested in games. We like to sort of, as you say, premium purchase up front. Whereas a lot of people, they see, hey, Plants vs. Zombies 2 is free. Awesome. Right. I can spend a whole bunch of time on this.
They have a positive reaction to it. Whereas once you've been around for a while, that almost, it's like, wait a second, nothing really should be free. So where's the catch is what we see.
Exactly. That's the realization that people have to make, is that in a single player game specifically, offering free content means they expect to get something out of you. I'm going to tangent here real quick and say in an MMO, making an MMO free doesn't necessarily guarantee that the company expects value out of you directly, because player population is so important in the MMO space that you don't necessarily have to worry about every single player paying in the MMO space. But the fact that they contribute to this larger ecosystem and make the world feel more alive for those paying players, that is the value to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think of other microtransactions that are totally fine within it. If it's cosmetic, to me, I don't mind at all. And I've never been really into the cosmetic side of things. I don't care about what my player looks like to others.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, they could wear like a garbage bag, it's fine. For me, it's always been about the game. And if the microtransaction starts affecting the game, that's where it can be a bit of a problem. And that's something we've seen over the evolution of multiplayer games, is this customization, where in a way you start playing kind of a different game than everyone else. I jumped into Black Ops 1 last night with my little brother because it was one of the only games he had.
Yeah.
And he had never played, he'd only played zombies. And he was amazed at this whole like perk system. And he's like, why do those people have better guns than me? I'm like, well, they've put in the time, and you need to put in that time, because filling the bars up and chasing. I mean, I still remember playing Modern Warfare and really like going after certain guns and like using a crappier gun to get all these headshots. And in a way, that is kind of a microtransaction that we see today. But back then, it was all game. You had to put in the time and the effort, so it didn't feel like a ripoff. Maybe it was a bit annoying that somebody had a better gun than yours.
It's all part of the progression system of the game.
Exactly. It was like if you come across a level 99 monster in an RPG and you're level 1, you don't be like, that's not fair, he's level 99. But if you can grind and get that your own way, that's part of the satisfaction of games. But once you introduce money to it, where if somebody kills you because their bazooka shoots further than you, that's garbage.
Yeah, I think that even if there are some people who insist that there's nothing wrong with the microtransaction model, they say like, oh, if you spend this much time playing a game, isn't it worth throwing a couple dollars at anyway? And I never like the idea of, I guess I spend a lot of time on this, I should throw some money at it. I still feel like I would have liked to made the premium purchase up front. Just because
the developer spent a lot of time on it, and you should give them money right off the front.
Yeah, but more than that, it's just the sense of like, if I'm putting money towards something, specifically these kinds of games that kind of like really like twist it out of you. You feel like, oh, my time is valuable, therefore it would make economic sense for me to spend money on this game instead of wasting my time grinding up to where, like, how long it would take me to earn the same currency in game. And then very specifically, when you don't even have a choice, when they say like, oh no, if you want the gun that deals 5 more damage, you have to pay for it. That is a clear example of where like, you can't even earn the in-game currency necessary to get the like higher benefit. That is cardinal sin in my view of like microtransactions.
A multiplayer game I've really enjoyed over the last year has been Rainbow Six Siege, and they use a system wherein you can pay for a season pass and you get the new operators the new characters that they roll out every quarter. You can also unlock them using in-game currency, and it's a fair process, but understandably it has to be a long process. But it's almost to the point where, I mean, if you look, you would have to be playing for 4 hours every single night for a month straight to get it. And I mean, you could, if you can, I don't know, if you can put those hours into working a minimum wage job to buy the DLC, and it's just so skewed. It felt a little unbalanced to me, where I thought that's felt ridiculous to me, and I ended up buying the DLC for it because I wanted the new characters. But that's a game where those characters have specific abilities, and if you don't have the money or the crazy amount of time to buy it, you could be at a disadvantage in certain levels in certain situations. When I look about how could it apply to, say, modern gaming? If I had played a typical adventure RPG, and let's say it's free to play now,
Yeah.
Like, how does that look? Because that could be how games go in the future. Are you going to get the beginning of the game and then you unlock levels? I mean, so it's basically every game becomes a demo. And if you want to play the second level, that could be a microtransaction. Would it be, if you want to use magic in this game, it's going to be a microtransaction? Could it just be like a timer? Are we going to go back to almost the era of like renting games? In some cases, I think that could be a positive thing moving forward. But as it is, it seems kind of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but it's sneaking in.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched upon a few things which, are we going to get instances where there's like a demo, you can try the game out, and then it's free for so long they have to pay for additional levels? I see no problem with that. That's the sort of like the classic demo model. There are other issues associated with that in terms of like how much of the game is free, at what point can you get a refund for what you've purchased, and this, that, and the other thing. That's a whole other discussion. Pay to use magic in the game, like cut an entire ability away from the player before, like charge them money to be able to use it. That's terrible. That's, it's cropping out such a significant portion of the game that you're probably not going to have a good experience playing the game anyway. And then if you're not having a good experience, why would you stick with the game? Why would you pay for it? So anytime you include microtransactions in the game, you have to walk this very fine line of like presenting value to the player and withholding that so that the player knows like, okay, I have a clear sense of what I could be getting if I forked over the additional cash. And I'm having fun already. You have to make it so that players can construct it in their own minds, the equation of like, I could be having more fun if I just paid a little more money. So with offering like content as a microtransaction, that's reasonably easy for the player to quantify, because they can say, okay, I've played this far into the game. I'm assuming I can expect more out of this game that's along the same lines. Here's my, payment for the game. And one game that did that really well was Ghost Trick Phantom Detective when it came out on iOS. They said like the first 1, 2, 3 chapters are free. Then you can either pay for the next 3 chapters, and the next 3 chapters, it might be the next 5 chapters, something like that. Or you can just pay one installment and get the whole rest of the game as a single payment. And that's what I did, because after I played through the first couple chapters of that game, I was like, this is great. I'd love to play the rest of it. And that game worked very well with that kind of distribution model because
it was episodic?
Yeah, exactly. It was broken up into these chapters where there were very clear delineations of where you could pay for the game. And in a way, I almost felt rewarded for like my faith in the game that making that one-time payment was less than paying for the next 5 chapters and the next 5 chapters after that. So for me, I saved a slight bit of money and got a really good game, and that felt like, handshake, move on, enjoy game. No sense of bitter, like, oh, but I could have like spent an inordinate amount of time grinding for this and then got it for free.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a pizza where you're getting one slice, and then if you like more, you buy more slices, or you could buy the whole pizza, rather than like, here's just the crust. What do you think? Do you want sauce on it? Because I would assume, like from a game developer standpoint, it would probably drive you crazy to think that this careful system you've put in place is being doled out, in different increments, and that people aren't experiencing, the whole thing at once. Because every part, it would be like playing Super Mario World, and you're like, oh, I didn't have the version with the cape. I mean, it's a totally different game, a lot harder game. I mean, what are your predictions for where this is going in the future? I think as long as they can still make money selling premium games, they're going to keep doing that. I would be totally fine with it coming down to like buying time with a game. I mean, the rental market worked for a long time with games and demos, and I'd like to see more of that come back too, where people can invest in it once you have it.
Yeah, Extra Credits actually talked about something like the digital rental and arcade sort of idea, where like you pay for your time with a game, and then eventually, like once you've paid for the game's total value, you just own it. So that way you can pay to get incremental access to the game, but then you can stop shy of paying the full price of the game. But if you do pay the full price of the game, then it's as if like it's a sort of rent to own kind of thing. And I really like the sound of that. In principle, it lets you try a little bit of the game without having to pay the full price. Because we've all had those experiences where we pay full price for a game, we get home, we try it out, and it's like, this is not at all what I expected. This is not at all what I wanted. And nowadays, if it's a physical product, it's reasonably easy to return it and get your money back. If it's a digital product, that's a bit more of a dicey situation.
I mean, Steam has 2 hours?
Yeah, 2
hours of playtime, and then maybe a larger time window. PlayStation, Sony is really against any kind of refund. I've managed to get maybe 1 or 2, and it's because I lied and said I had a kid who accidentally bought it.
Yeah, and that's the thing where you like, they don't even want you to try the game out at all. And there definitely needs to be like a better balance of being able to, understand that when a marketing firm is doing their best to hype up a product, eventually you just end up with something that is not at all what you expected from the look of that marketing. And therefore you need to have measures in place to protect the consumer and people to be able to reclaim, get their money back because they were sold something that doesn't hold up to reality or doesn't hold up to what their expectations were built up to by the marketing department.
Is there a specific game you're talking about here? Because there's a pretty big example of No Man's Sky. Yeah. A game that's half a victim of hype and half a victim of a few fibs that were told.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of No Man's Sky talked about. I didn't get the game for myself. It didn't strike me as interesting. Like, as amazing as everyone was hyping it up to be, I just kind of saw what there was shown of the game. I was like, there's nothing here that would make me want to play this.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely what I thought. I thought that's a really great system you have, but where's the game? And it turns out that the game was this survival piece they sort of added on. But I mean, one of the few things that people have been correct in calling out is that they were specifically told there was going to be, you can play with your friends. And like, playing the game at the same time as your friend while on the phone with them is not really playing a game with your friend. So they have a lot to answer to on that situation. But yeah, it was a game that was just built up out of hype, and he was offering a pretty generous refund rate on that.
We've kind of drifted a bit from our discussion of microtransactions, but
okay. Well, you want to talk about what Plants vs Zombies, what they did wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned at the top of the show how like you reasonably enjoyed the first game, and so
loved it.
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun playing the core game, which I'd paid for, but then they added a whole bunch of microtransactions because I believe Plants vs Zombies was originally developed by PopCap, and then PopCap was bought by EA, and I believe, not 100% sure about this, but it feels like they slapped microtransactions onto the game where there wasn't when it was originally released.
Plants vs Zombies 2.
Well, Plants vs Zombies 2 was developed from the ground up to have microtransactions.
Yes. And they added them to Plants vs Zombies 1 as well?
Yeah.
Oh my God, they just Frankenstein them on.
Oh God, did they ever. There were some things which were fine, where you were genuinely paying for new modes, new content. That felt reasonable. But all of it could be done with in-game currency. And the in-game currency model that they added to that game was so broken. Like, they did this really weird thing where the idea of farming for currency, you try to find some activity in the game that has a very high yield to low input, easy to do, or difficult to do but has a high yield. Most gamers are familiar with farming for something, whether it's experience or currency or whatever, at some point in a game. They actually added a mechanic to Plants vs. Zombies exclusively for farming.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called the Zen Garden. And it was the
That's a good name
most
for it.
stressful part of the game. It was so stressful because you have these, you buy plants and the plants spit out coins. You don't get the coins unless you have the game open. You have to have the game open. You have to tap those coins as the plants drop them. Oh, you don't want to do that? You don't want to have the game constantly open so you can farm your currency? Oh, you can buy the snail that'll collect the currency for you.
Okay.
But the snail falls asleep. So you got to buy chocolate for the snail to pick up the coins that the plants drop. It's this never-ending cycle.
And the chocolate, we ran out of that. So you need to open up this other app called Cocoa Farm. And the workers are now asleep. You need to feed them cocoa leaves.
You get chocolate as a rare drop in the game. And there were certain things that would more likely to drop chocolate than others. Like if you defeated a gargantuan, it would drop chocolate. So it became this like nightmarish mode of like scavenging the game for anything that drops chocolate so you can feed the snail so the snail will get you money. For what? Like it was so stressful. And like as I said, the chocolate would wear out. So you have like this mental tally in the back of your mind of like, oh God, the snail's chocolate is going to run out. I got to reopen the game. I got to feed him more chocolate so I can get more money. And it's just like this stress and energy mechanism that I participated in because I refused to spend money on the microtransactions. But it left me with this.
What are you getting out of buying these microtransactions?
Content, like additional modes and stuff tied to achievements and all these things, which like I wanted to experience more of the game. But if they'd have just charged a higher price and had all of this available, I would have been way happier with that. Like, because overall, this microtransaction Zen Garden thing left me with a really bitter feeling about the game. Whereas I originally really liked the game, but having participated in that, the feeling like the stress of like the ticker counting down, and if I don't feed the chocolate to the snail, I'm not getting the optimal amount of money out of this, and just the thing like compelling you to have like the game like opening and reopening, trying to get you back into the ecosystem. Like it's a Skinner box. The purpose of a Skinner box is to create operant conditioning, which basically means that through a combination of stimuli or punishment, you're creating conditioned behavior in the player. And what they can use that for is to create a sort of like a feedback loop of you like pouring more money into the game, just basically using this cycle of reward, either through fixed intervals, random intervals. Like the way that the Skinner box operates is different depending on which kind of behavior they're trying to elicit in the player. And a lot of games that employ energy systems are nothing more than these psychological traps, which compel you to like open the game on a sort of recurring basis and keep you in the ecosystem. Games like Candy Crush are very much like constructed to be a Skinner box. Like you don't even have to peel back that many layers to like reveal how it is this like really terrible thing to be doing to people. The fact that they offer most microtransactions in that game at the point where you have failed a level, like you've lost the level, oh no, but here you can pay $1 to get this item which you can use to win the level. Like they
wow.
construct the people have this idea that a match 3 game is random, that like just random tiles are falling. It's not. They have such tight control of like where things are falling.
It's like a scratch and win.
Yeah, and like random like power-ups will trigger in the game that it looks like, oh, it's so good, I'm getting all these points, but those random power-ups are popping very specific like candies on the board to make others fall into line such a specific way so that I remember what I said earlier in the episode about constructing the equation in the player's head. You know that by paying that money, that $1, just $1 purchase, that you will win the level because you can see everything on the board. You can say like, oh my gosh, if I only had 3 more moves, hey, I can buy 3 more moves.
Right.
it's so specifically constructed just to like hold victory behind a paywall. You end up spending, or some people are so compelled by this, especially because of the social aspects they introduce into the game, that they end up spending so much money on these games, like stupid amounts, like way more than you would ever reasonably spend on a game that's actually like fun and well made and isn't just trying to manipulate you and extract as much cash out of you as possible. Like the fact that microtransactions come in these increments of like, oh, you can spend $1, you can spend $5, you can spend $10, you can spend $20, $50, $100. Who's going to spend $100 on a crappy mobile game when you could spend half of that and get like an amazing game for 3DS or something like that. And it just, the value is completely skewed on those kind of purchases.
I've mentioned this before, but Jason Mewes from Jay and Silent Bob was talking on the Game Informer podcast show, and he's big into like mobile games, and they're asking him like, what games do you play? And he's like, I don't have time to have kids, so I play this mobile one, and it was like a pack opening sort of like DC Universe kind of game. And he got in trouble from his wife because he had spent thousands of dollars in a month, on it because of that psychology of it. And if you have, a certain amount of disposable income, but the scary thing is that these things can be connected. Well, they're always connected to credit cards. And that means that people could easily spend a lot more money than they have at a very small incremental rate that you're playing every day. And it can add up really fast. And that just leaves such a bad taste in everybody's mouths, except the people up at the top that are raking in the money of it. The people that are working for these companies making art assets, they're not happy with it. Nobody's really happy except just the top part getting the money. And I don't think it's really healthy for the industry. But you look at gambling, you look at like these machines that are in bars, and you look at scratch tickets that are at gas stations. That is thriving.
Yeah.
So no matter and those don't even have a colorful, well, slot machines do, but I mean, I would say they're less fun than saying Plants vs. Zombies. So those will thrive. I think that it's attacking a different consumer. You and me are not interested in Plants vs. Zombies 2, but a completely different group of people are interested in Plants vs. Zombies 2. My only hope is that these people, I was watching an older guy, huge guy in a big truck with a dog playing Candy Crush. And I thought, man, what if they made a Candy Crush that had a story, like an interesting character? What would happen then? What if there was like an RPG of a Candy Crush? What if these games are actually fun? I don't know if that'll ever happen. I don't know. Could this be a gateway drug for this guy to come over and be like, what's Zelda?
No, I don't think so. I think that they're not going to bother to create these kind of stories and these kind of games because it actually detracts from the mechanism which they have so tightly constructed. I think that they, these companies aren't looking to create experiences or games or any of these kind of things that have any value for the player. So why should they make a story? Why should they spend any amount of the money that they could be spending to, squeeze more money out of you? These are corporate decisions fueling psychological traps. There's no way they're ever going to try and make good on any of this. Like they're not going to pull a Scrooge and sort of turn around and put all this to good use. That's just not what these people are interested in. And Candy Crush is a particularly vile beast because they're only charging $1 at a time. Like I was mentioning earlier, how there's these ridiculous, like you can spend $100 in one go. Maybe somebody does that just to be crazy, and they like make a YouTube video of opening 50 packs in Hearthstone.
Or if you're just deep into the addiction of it, and it becomes, you don't have the foresight to see that this is crazy. But if you're so involved in it, that doesn't seem crazy.
Right. And when I was researching all this stuff, I was looking at the App Store and realizing that there's all these games that charge like these ridiculous, like hundreds of dollars at a time that you can just throw away. But which is the game that's making the most money in the App Store? Candy Crush. And it's doing it $1 at a time. They are nickel and diming you to death because that amount seems so small that you can just throw it away without thinking of it. Like it's well, I mean,
it's like asking somebody with a lot of things that people spend money on. If somebody spends a couple dollars every single day on a coffee or more, but if you showed them how much they spend per month, they might seriously rethink their hobby. Of not like a hobby, but that habit.
And I think it's a very clear illustration of like taking advantage of human nature, because as you say, if you give people that perspective on how much they're spending, then they might be like, whoa, oh my gosh, I should have taken the time to do this for myself. But most people don't. Most people just don't even think about it. They're like, oh, $1, it's so little. Of course I can just, I can afford to spend this. And then, maybe you get the bill at the end of the month and you realize, oh, geez, this was way more expensive than I thought it was. And I think,
but I'm assuming that they're incredibly smart and that on your bill, it would never show up as a monthly total in terms of Candy Crush. It would just be $1 here, $1 here, $1 there.
right. Well, but Apple's still going to give you like a sum total of your, like, you're going to see it on your credit card history. You're going to see like how much you spent on a monthly basis. That is assuming people are using their credit cards responsibly. I guess not everyone is. So Candy Crush, root of all evil, any game that tries to be like that. Plants vs. Zombies 2, EA, evil to a lesser extent. One of the specific things that turned me off of the second game in that series, I kid you not, 15% of the screen real estate is taken up by buttons that are directly linked to microtransactions.
Wow.
There are the 3 power-ups, the pay-to-win power-ups, the use X amount of in-game currency to get godlike powers and win this level.
And it's so devious because the crux of that game is, are you going to make it? It's like you're just getting by in the skin of your teeth in the best Plants vs. Zombies match. So for having this like escape button that costs $1 or whatever it does is devious.
And that's something that they anytime you tie in the mechanic of like, oh, you can spend money to make something easier. How can you possibly argue that the developer is not then motivated to make the level artificially difficult so you have to pay to win? There's just no way that, human nature being what it is, you can't be, even subconsciously, the developer could be making every effort to make the game fair and balanced. But knowing that if they make the game more difficult, that people will have to pay for it, it's too tempting not to. And you skew and like tweak values not to make the game balanced for fun, but balanced for profit. And I mean, they committed one of the cardinal sins, as I said earlier, about like actually putting the most powerful plants from the previous game behind a paywall. Not one that you can earn with in-game currency, but they just straight up said like, oh, you want the ice pea plant that slows down zombies and gives you a better chance of being able to win the game? That'll be $3 for this like one single plant in the game. And it's just absolutely ridiculous that they don't give you the opportunity to earn it when there's just this very clear example of this plant, you need it to win, and it's $3. Like, could they be any more blatant? Yes. Let's hope that day doesn't come. Sort of looking forward, are these games going to have success? Yes, because they're preying on very basic parts of the human psyche. Like, unless we really change our way of thinking about this on a massive scale, unless there's legislation induced, like brought about to make it so that developers can't take advantage of people on this level, I don't think there's going to be any stopping it. I think there's going to be always this sense of people trying to make a quick buck and exploiting people on this level. And as long as it continues to work, they'll continue to do it because that is the kind of corporate decision-making that's going into making these games in the first place.
Yeah, a few minutes back, I was thinking about this legislation. It's interesting you brought that up. Would it make sense to say that any of these microtransaction type games would be classified as gambling, and you need to be a certain age? And then I thought, well, they'd never actually give you any money back. So in a way, you're not gambling, and it's 1,000 times more brilliant than gambling because you never win anything. Yeah. You just win artificialness. It's an artificial currency of lights going off. Yeah. And it's this empty nothing. Yeah. It's not money. It's not food. It's just more crystals or whatever the hell happens at the end of Candy Crush.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like classifying this nature of microtransactions as gambling doesn't solve the problem, because okay, that at least means your kids can't spend all your money on the game, but they're just going to ask their parents to spend all their money for them. There's so many things that microtransactions allow in terms of just awful game design. And I don't mean games that are strictly bad. I mean games that are using the best and most potent arts of game design to create things that are fun, but that hold your fun hostage and charge you money for it. I definitely believe that microtransactions have a place in our industry, that they can be used to provide content. Ghost Trick was a fantastic example. Next up, we're going to be doing a discussion about Hearthstone, how it handles microtransactions better. Not perfect, but better than most of the games we've discussed on this podcast. So I feel like it would be rash to say that the industry should be that they should be banned as a whole, because there are very clear instances where they do make sense and where they do enable for consumers to get all they want out of an experience without paying full retail price for an experience that they don't commit to. Like if you only play a certain percentage of a game, and you're dissatisfied with it, or you're not going to continue it, you get better value out of it by only having to pay a portion of the cost. So there are clear examples of where microtransactions are good and beneficial to consumers, but overall, all we need to do is crack open the App Store and look at the top grossing apps. Okay, good, Minecraft is on there, but most of them are just like various skins on Farmville. They're all these games that are nothing more than psychological traps and don't offer any redeeming value to the consumer.
Right. Well, could we offer, if in case you're listening to this and you're wondering, I'm held hostage, what's a good alternative? You could grab a 3DS, you could grab a DS, you could grab a PlayStation Vita. If you like strategy games, you could play Advance Wars.
You will spend less money and have more fun playing these games that are a premium experience, that you're actually going to enjoy, games that have actual stories to tell. The difference between, like, I used to play Hearthstone while I was walking home from work, and even though I liked that game, I feel like there are like just other things that you can be like other experiences that are more rewarding, not necessarily that you can play while you're walking home. Now I play Pokemon Go while I'm walking home. And Pokemon Go, does it do microtransactions well? It doesn't feel as evil as things like Plants vs. Zombies or Candy Crush, because they do let you earn all the currency that's necessary. And it is a beast unlike any other we've seen so far, and it's certainly going to spawn a lot of imitators and people who want to capitalize on the same kind of money that Niantic and the Pokemon Company are raking in. And as is the nature of imitators, they are probably going to be much more nefarious about the way they do microtransactions. So we could be on the advent of just an absolute, like, another wave of even more nefarious microtransaction-based games that are just capitalizing on the formula of Pokemon Go. Who knows? I think ultimately there's a lot more that needs to be done to protect consumers. Is it going to come down to legislation from the government or a self-imposed body like the ESRB? I don't know. I think this becomes very quickly a question of ethics and morality, not just like, standard consumer practice and these kind of things, because there are clear instances of these companies taking advantage of people, and you've got a moral dilemma that needs solving here. It's going to take a lot of careful thinking through and regulation to make sure that it's handled properly and doesn't just wholesale get rid of these things that can be used for good, just usually aren't.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode on microtransactions. You can listen to the audio version through iTunes or any of your podcasting software. You just type in Gameology, all one word. It's also up at the A 90s Kid YouTube channel, where sometimes I add some cool video alongside it. You don't get to see our faces, but you get to see some beautifully rendered graphical images. That's A 90s Kid, also called Gameology. I'm Matt. You can find me on Twitter at GameThinkTalk.
You can follow me on Twitter at BluishGrainPro, or you can check out my website, bluishgrainproductions.com, where you can also submit user feedback and questions to be featured and answered on the show.
Bye for now.
That was hefty.